wave their hands. Christen, we know, she joins this panel from the German software company G2K. She's the managing director for this region, and her firm's a provider of an AOIT. I told you we'd use AI in the second half a lot more. It's named Parsifal in pure Wagnerian fashion, and it aims to make smart cities function smarter by collecting and fine-tuning data and making predictive analysis to make operations more efficient and effective. Mohannad Salam.
Hi.
He's the regional lead, Smart Cities and Digital Twin at Atkins, which is a division of SNC-Lavalin, the large global Canadian engineering and project management firm. He's the head of the team that provides innovative advisory solutions for designing smart cities across the region. He's had 20 years experience of it. I've had a chance to talk to him before, and he's a fascinating store of information. He also, which I hope we can bring into this conversation, has had a food security consultancy business. And I think that may impinge on our discussion today. Aluisio Figeuiredo, who I do know. He is a well-known and respected executive in the video intelligence industry. He's the CEO of Intelligent Security Systems, or ISS. And ISS software runs in some of the most sophisticated smart city and smart transportation installations in the world. Notably, and I'm sure this will come into conversation, ISS won the Mexico City Smart City mandate. I mean, it's the biggest in the American hemisphere. Has about 65,000 active cameras at the moment. And I'm interested to see if we can bring some parallels into Dubai. James Connolly, whose face I've now seen, who I've spoken to. He's an alumnus of Microsoft's prestigious worldwide graduate program, and he's a founder member of Darktrace's Middle East business since last year. Darktrace is primarily known, it's now a public company, I think it went public recently, as a cybersecurity firm, but James also brings in a wealth of experience in AI, machine learning, cloud, big data, and cybersecurity as well. Last but far from least, Nabil Cheqroun works for the formidable Honeywell. He has an electrical engineering degree from CESI Paris School of Engineering and a specialized master's in project and program management from Schema Business School. He's the chap responsible for Honeywell building solutions projects across the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. It really has an excellent reputation as an integrator. And again, in talking to Nabil in advance, I'm impressed by the depth and breadth of his knowledge. I have to take a breath now after all those introductions. Okay, let's ask a simple first question. And by the way, please, I know you're not shy retiring violets in your normal lives. Feel free to raise hands, roving microphones. We can make this as interactive as we want it to be. The short question, help me define what a smart city is. Who wants to go first? There you go. Aluisio, what's a smart city? Yeah, there are two mics, by the way. Press the button to the left.
Hello? Yes. For us, Richard, I will go actually on the wave of what Arif mentioned before. For me, it's to make a smart city, a modern, smart, safe city today. It's a collection of a variety of sensors. They are cameras, as Samir mentioned, that's being used more and more as a sensor. Weather sensor, flood sensors, traffic lights, a collection of those devices sent to a location where this metadata is being analyzed and then provide reactions. The AI is the type of communication, All those is part of the ecosystem. And more we see this being standardized. You cannot be hostage of a certain technology here and there, and they change quite often. So what we see is basically tons of information going to a central location, being processed and generating reactions. And again, what Arif said as well, this is not to replace the human being. We are we are multiplying the force. I was talking to Dubai Police recently here, we were talking about that. It's providing and streamlining the information so they can take quick reactions. That's more or less what I see today on the Smart City.
Thank you. Christen?
Thank you. I think obviously this is a great definition, and I agree 100%. We do also define it as a smart city is whatever geography the client wants to gain intelligent business analytics from. It may be one smart city, one location in one place in the world, or it could be tying in together multiple locations, such as a global retail brand creating analytics from all of their inputs and customers globally to create a smart city for that brand, as well as the same type of thing on critical sites. So the world is getting smaller and smaller, and we need to think beyond the geography we can see and bring in the analytics globally that can help predict now and in the future here and in other places what's going to happen and take action.
Nabil, you want to chip in?
Thank you. But for me, the smart city is basically something around sustainability, how to manage the growth of population around the triptych, which are a social aspect, the economical viability, and the people. And when we talk about smart cities, the definition is very local. Like every country we operate have a different definition about what it is. But the end goal, I think, is to enhance life of people, make it easier with solutions and technology that are easy to deploy and economically viable.
Okay. It all sounds very nice so far. It's all very harmonic. Mohannad.
Thank you. So, how smart is smart? That's the question.
That's a great question.
Usually, and that's why smart. Sometimes it's philosophical rather than it's a tangible. So when we say a smart student, what does that mean, right? Can a smart student fail in math but succeed in everything and we still consider them smart? And similarly, cities, to be considered smart, they need to be covering the whole spectrum of a city rather than focusing on something and becoming very smart in that thing. And among that becomes resiliency, becomes sustainability, inclusivity. So the more the city talks to those aspects and covers them on a wider scale, the more that city is becoming smarter. But there's no limit for smart. So intelligence and smart is agility. So we see now there are wars firing up there. How much are we resilient to those wars? We can say that we are smart. We can tackle that more.
I like that. James.
Thank you. I think when you're on the end, you try and add value to these great points raised. So I'll try and do my best. I think often it's actually about happiness, really. How happy are the citizens of a particular city, of a particular country, and how essentially governments and city organizations are adding value to what it's like to live in a particular city. I think there's probably quite a few opportunities and also risks. I think the opportunity, it's been covered already a little bit today around personalization. Mm-hmm. So personalizing what it's like to live in that city, making it more relevant for that citizen. Also, there's a big security one as well. We talked a lot about connected objects, smart objects, which is all great, but that also increases what I tend to call the sort of the attack surface. So there's also risks implicit with obviously moving to smart cities. So yeah, hope that was a bit of a summary.
Okay, I want to go back to Mohannad. You and I had a little chat before. It was raised earlier in the conversation today about the ability to, the word standardization. taking from a blueprint somewhere that has worked or you've learned from and moving it into another city situation. What's your experience of that been at Atkins and or what you've seen elsewhere? Does it apply? Where has it applied successfully and where has it failed? Well, you can go back the other way. I was actually looking at Mohannad, but if you want to be him, you can. Let me just pass them. I'd say share. Oh, by the way, there are two microphones.
I could perhaps give a few thoughts. And then...
I can speak a little louder. Mohannad.
So can you repeat your question?
That was an enormous question.
Just summarize it for me.
It's really saying standardization. Can you transplant one city's successful experience into another setting? Where, in your experience, has that happened and where has it failed and why?
Yeah, that's a nice question, very interesting question. And there are yes and no's in that. So copy pasting one city's success story fully into another city doesn't really mean it will work there. What works in Middle East doesn't necessarily work in Asia or in Europe, but that is not totally. So when we are tackling aspects like sustainability, I believe that's a global, and things can be replicated here and there with adjustments to match the society and culture of every city. But prioritizing, when you talk about smart cities, we start talking about use cases or those smart city initiatives like waste management. Do we need to make waste management smart? Do we want to make street lights smart? And those use cases now is where we start doing prioritizing. Is waste management a priority in city A and city B, or it's just for city A, and for city B there's more challenging aspects? And that's where we need to understand the city by the stakeholders of the city, by the people of the city, understanding what matters for them most, what are their priorities. Accordingly, we'll say, okay, maybe waste management is important, but maybe for next year, this year we need to focus on something else. And if we try to do the opposite, then the return on investment will fail, and that's where failure stories start happening there.
Do you have, and I'd ask the same, by the way, with Honeywell, because you've got a lot of examples, and I'll turn to you, Aluisio, to talk about the Mexico City. But do you have examples where a city has successfully, a real example where they've successfully imported ideas that have worked? Yeah, well, first finish off, Mohannad, then
yeah, sure. There is a lot. So
examples.
I believe Spain and Barcelona were the first, and then Tokyo. Those cities did great initiatives in the past for smart cities, and Dubai is a pioneer in this region, and I'll talk about that. So Dubai benchmarked a lot of those cities and took a lot of success stories from there and implemented there here in Dubai. What we saw in Dubai in the past 5-6 years was nothing like in the region. Now we see a lot of projects happening or taking over in Saudi Arabia. But I'd say that this is more of community projects rather than a full city scale project like what we saw in Dubai here. So we're blessed to be here with that leadership where we saw a real smart city project, and that led us to see the quality of life that we all praise here in Dubai.
Hold on a second.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Joseph, do you want us to stop while you finish the phone call? Thank you. Nabil.
No, to your question, Richard, on how we can actually duplicate the case. Honeywell as a technology provider, we are actually working with the policymakers, with the end users to understand their need. I think it's all about understanding what is the end purpose. Some countries will have different challenges, obviously, but one common thing is the growth in population. And I think Samir was highlighting a number that was a bit of a surprise to me, 3 million additional heads globally per week. And we see this like in one of the projects we're actually deploying and we are delivering in Egypt. when I came here in the region 15 years ago, the Egypt population was around 80 million. Now it went up to 100 million. And they're creating a completely new capital to address those expansion in population. And what we've been doing with the New Cairo capital and SUD in particular, we were trying to think of what makes sense to them in terms of mobility, in terms of safety, in terms of quality of life, how to enhance the sustainability and how to use the resources in a wise manner to make it smart. And to your point, smart is so, like it's not, we can't quantify what smart means. And usually, and to Mhandis Arif's point, when you as a technology provider, you basically work on some solutions and you don't fully understand what is the need or the problem, you don't address it fully. And we see this like a gap in communication, a gap of understanding of what are the challenges on the ground. And usually the sales guys in any organization, let's be a bit pragmatic, they try to sell, that's their mandate. Sometimes they don't fully understand what they're talking about. Sometimes the customer is not fully transparent or clear enough to translate what are the problems for a competitiveness issue or for whatever internal challenges they face. But what I see when we engage actually the right level of understanding of skills and early engagement with any customer, we're able to duplicate a success story with the, as mentioned, use cases. Like it's all about what matters to that specific location and how we can translate that into a viable solution.
I just okay. I just got a little ping. All of you have mics on your.
Actually,
other
I
than
have.
Christen. You do? Okay, so Christen holds the microphone, and that's all.
We share. Okay.
Have you been?
No, we'll
okay,
share.
Share that.
We'll share.
It works, yeah. It does actually work. Although it's sweet seeing you pass it up and down the line. Do you want to go for that?
Yeah,
one?
I would love to. I mean, we see a lot of use cases. You know, when I joined from another industry, I was trying to figure out how do you learn more about AI? How do you learn more about machine learning? And our CTO sat me down and said, "You've taken enough classes. You spend enough money. The frontier of AI is advanced when you're sitting in front of that client, identifying what their needs are, and coming back to us and saying, this is the dream. This is where they want to go. This is the problem they have. So how do we come up with a way for that?" And every use case we have has come from security first. And then you find a way, if we choose to develop it, to put it into other areas of revenue. So for example, in our first use case, anti-terrorism algorithms for extreme blacklist bad guys, you flip it on the other side, that's VVIP whitelist in a retail situation. It's the same thing. You need to recognize a person instantly that has security concerns and take protocol, whether it's in a happy way or a bad way, to make sure that you've got the client needs. Things like heat mapping and people tracking come from critical sites. People needed to know where their military personnel are. Well, clients want to know where they are in the mall too. And this part of the world is amazing because the ownership structure ends up frequently having overlap. So there isn't a place in Dubai or in Saudi or in Qatar or in Bahrain or Kuwait that is also not a critical site. So table stakes are keeping people safe. And then how do you continue to develop the use cases to allow monetization and revenue in those areas? So just like Honeywell, we're working in New Capital, we're working in Madanati in Egypt. There's 1 million residents in there, and they demanded that we produce a community application for them so that they could do maintenance tickets, they could do restaurant reservations. And that came as an offshoot to the security personnel who have our product Parsifal on their phones to deploy in the event of security incidences and emergencies. Why couldn't we flip that and let the residents have greater control and happiness in their community? So I think every use case, you're always looking for another way to use that use case to enhance people's lives, whether it's keeping them safe or enhancing revenue.
Great. Aluisio, coming back to that trend again, I actually wanted to link you from Mexico to Dubai. Is there anything that you can pick out of what you've been doing there that has any resonance here potentially?
I would say Richard, the experience in the technology side is obviously applicable to anywhere, the communication, the standardization of protocols, how the law enforcement reacts, and how we work with law enforcement. I think Christen, Mohannad and Nabil brought up a good point. This is not a mile wide and an inch deep. It's actually a mile deep and an inch wide. We need to work with the stakeholders that are managing cities, city officials, law enforcement, emergency response, and understand how we can make their life easier. And there's a variety of technologies. Yeah, the AI, yeah, that's a piece of the puzzle. There are a lot of layers on top of those technologies that will make them effective. AI is a piece of the puzzle, there is much more. At the end of the day, is the well-being of the citizen. I like to say that a smart city has just one customer, which is the citizen. What we see in Mexico City and many others, Mexico City is a good example because it's enormous. It's 65,000 cameras and over 130,000 sensors, from seismic sensors to emergency buttons, to loudspeakers. It's a monster project, but there are many others that we can take lessons from. And I think at the end of the day is how you attract talent to come to your city. And Dubai is notorious for that. People come here. It's a safe environment. It's a good place to raise your family, and you can pretty much walk on the streets comfortably. I actually read an article that the government wants the citizen to do everything from his cell phone. They want to get to a point that any service you need, you can do it from your cell phone. And that's, I think, is the end game. And digitalize the whole city to get to that point.
Let's keep on kind of an AI theme a little bit. I know you, Christen, will have something to say about that, and you have already. Let's start back with James again, kind of a broad perspective of why is it valuable, the general question. Why and when is it valuable in a smart city setting? And what have you seen as its most useful applications in kind of real time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm using this mic, by the way, guys. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Certainly, when I've worked with clients and organizations in the past, the big question to ask is why? Why are we looking at AI? Why are we looking to apply AI technologies, and what really is the objective and the success criteria for that initiative? So I think we all know in the room, AI is a huge buzzword. Lots of people talk about it. It's an event. I know we're back in the Microsoft days. Whenever Microsoft do an event, it's called AI Week. You know, it's literally a big thing. But it's often about sort of why and what the success criteria is for that particular kind of approach. I think the other thing as well to think about is identifying operational KPIs. I think in the talk earlier, it's very interesting around, you know, exactly what the challenges have been, but also what the goals are as well. So can you actually quantify the percentage or the time it takes to do a particular activity as a citizen? You know, for me personally, when I first came to Dubai, I thought the process was amazing, you know, to get the Emirates ID, and it was just fantastic, brilliant. You know, it will vary by country and city, etc. But it's how we can improve that experience and applying operational KPIs and then improving that as well, rather than diving in and just saying, we're going to throw a bit of AI in there, let's see what happens. I think the other thing, it was mentioned earlier as well, around, you know, basically human beings and the role of the human with the use of AI. I think the big thing that, you know, I've certainly worked with clients on is that it is there to help people improve their day-to-day lives and their day-to-day jobs and make them more successful and happier employees, happier citizens. I think sometimes there's a bit of an aspect of AI as well, you know, this is going to take a task or it's going to take a role. It might do, but then it might release a person to go and do something a little bit more kind of value add as well. So they're definitely the things I would recommend if you're looking at, and certainly with the Smart City Initiative, you know, identifying areas where AI can help and support and be valuable. they're certainly the things I would recommend to think about.
I'd love maybe, Mohannad, if you, even at Atkins, I'd love some specific experiences of where you've seen this working or where you plan to use it in your particular project. AI, no, AI in specifically. AI technologies.
Yeah, definitely. So in the context of smart city, we can't but use the enablers, and the main enabler here, or one of the main enablers, is technology. Now, just to understand it and understand why AI, what is artificial intelligence in small sense. If we are here, we have all the bright minds here in this room. We all believe that, right? So if it's about happiness, for example, if we get a citizen here or someone and we say, let's put a plan for that citizen to become happy in the next 5 years, don't you think we can come up to an agreement and put a plan that we want to satisfy that citizen and make him happy for the next 5 years with wow every day, right? Every day we want a plan that makes him happy. Isn't that achievable? But when we talk about 1 million, what's now what? About 2 million citizens, about tourists coming in, about all those disruptions happening, pandemic and. Now that us in the room and another army with us, well, we won't be able to do that. And that's where the machine can start. The machine will get from us what makes that human being happy. And those are the rules that we put for the machine. But now the machines are able to do the hard work, the leg work that we human, we can't. All right? We don't have this power. And that's where the synergy between the human and the machine and technology should happen. Nobody is putting the human on the side. It's not about robots taking over the human. It's about how we can serve those variables, those enormous variables. And that's why technology is an enabler, and it's a main enabler.
Thank you.
Hope I did.
Thank you. Nabil?
Yeah, I hope you can all hear me. So I think AI is somehow very specific, and I'm sometimes skeptical about the use of the word because it means something in some people's mouth. It's perceived differently in some others. I think when we talk about data, the amount of data, and I think that's what Mohannad is highlighting, the amount of data that we can actually process is limited. And the computers can process much bigger amount of data in an organized, structured way. And when we talk about AI at Honeywell, we talk about understanding the past data in a way to predict the future. And I think in AI, that's the simplest definition in our terminology. How can we ease the future with what we know from what has been actually pulled from our various field devices? We have a couple of use cases. We have obviously the security video management system, but we see, and I think Engineer Arif was also highlighting this before, we have at least at some point some laws of physics stopper. You know, we can think very big, but then you see that things are actually not possible. And we will always need people to adjust from what the computers and the AI is actually providing and sharing. And then you have the cost of the operational cost, like how much of cost you need to inject to achieve that target. I think from a technology provider, what we are actually working on, it's an important role, it's a mandate, is to make things simpler for the users, for the operators, for the end users, on simple, small things. Like I heavily believe in small changes can make our lives easier. And it's not always about buzzwords and big initiatives. It's what do we do to tackle the smallest challenge that we all face. Pandemic is one of them. We in Honeywell, we're working a lot on sustainability, improving air quality. Sometimes we have all of these air conditioning systems, and we don't need an advanced technology
technology to make our life easier and better. We just need to understand what we want and use the past data to predict how we can make it easier.
Good. Christen, you've probably got a few thoughts about this area.
Sure. I mean, I agree with everything the gentlemen have said so far. I can think of 3 specific clients that we work with where it's true AI. I think frequently we're all sitting in there talking about machine learning with the clients. So it's always hard to find where the AI is. But the clients that are able to use AI are the ones that have incredible amounts of touch points and incredible amounts of data. So you'll meet a client that says, okay, you put in 1 facial recognition camera for me, AI. There's no AI in this. That's like, yes or no, that's pretty easy. But if you think about, for example, Mohannad over in Egypt, we've tied in thousands of sensors and cameras, and as I said, the community app and the maintenance app, and we're tracking for them water usage down to the individual home, but then also down to the individual sprinkler system and looking for spikes in different zones to identify, is there a leak underwater? So when they're doing things like installing sprinkler systems or faucets and toilets, anything with water, they're scanning in the inventory. So once they see a certain amount of maintenance tickets come in, they can initiate preventive maintenance versus waiting for a leak to come in. If you see a water spike in some place, they know typically there's a leaky pipe underwater. But over time, collecting this data has allowed us to generate reports to allow them to future buy water and electricity. So based on weather, time, holidays, you know, the pandemic throws it off a little bit because people are home more, but based on all the usage that they've seen since inception, when is the right time to make the buy to prevent spending more on your utilities? So we see clients liking to do that. You know, we've got a very custom use case in Mexico where it's a large chain of like kind of like those little Zoom markets. They came and said, we've got all this data. So they're overlaying commodities, crime, school holidays, pollution, temperature, sporting events, the scores of sporting events the night before to determine at what point should they raise the price of soda 5% in a particular store. So think about where the closest Zoom is here. It may be the one there, but not the one there. And they've determined that when they do that, the spend goes up 40% for a short amount of time. So to be able to strategically price, does it work all the time? Absolutely not, but it works enough to make it worth the investment to do that. And on the other hand, we see AI in things like anti-terrorism. We work with the federal governments of Germany and Austria on anti-smuggling routes. So, you know, we all know that people are smuggling humans, drugs, weapons. You know, smuggling is, you know, the second oldest profession. But we need to know where they're going to be. So it's not good enough to know where they're coming from, but to being able to take all the available resources from those governments and overlay what other information that they think is important, work in partnerships with universities to crunch the data. We're able to tell them, we think this is where the next route is, and here's the type of people that are going to be coming in. It's going to be children, it's going to be weapons. What is it going to be so that they can prepare to be there? Because if you can cut off just one smuggling route and save some lives that way, it's worth it. It's worth it to the world.
Can I ask you a question, kind of inside the box, because we haven't really asked these questions here yet. How complicated is the development of the software to produce the desired results with all those inputs? We asked your developers.
Yeah, it depends. You know, like we had one last year that I was working with a partner in this room where the client was in Saudi and they said, we want to, it was way in the middle of nowhere. And they wanted to know, in the middle of the desert, nothing around it. They wanted to watch out for guys walking up to this site wearing particular, they wanted to know, were they wearing shoes and what particular shoes? And I was new to Dubai and I'm thinking, well, if they're not wearing shoes, aren't they going to die? It's like super hot, their feet are going to burn off. So how big of a problem is this? But the client, this is what they want. So they showed us the shoes they wanted and we had to machine learn the particular shoes. That's not that hard, but it always costs more to the client than they think it should. They think you should just magically, like from a movie, take all the shoes in the world and be like, ding, there's your shoe. But that's not how it works. So if you're just doing a simple machine learning, it's not that hard. The more complex use cases you layer in, it becomes harder and harder. You have to have the computing power and you have to also have a client that's willing to invest in the development to do that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And I know Aluisio, ISS has been around 25 years and was developing neural networks and machine learning before it became AI. What are your views on all of this?
I think that we need to separate exactly what Christen said before, license plate recognition or other type of algorithms. This we did when AI was called deep learning back in the day. So 25 years in experience gave us the capabilities and the library to make now the machine learning a bit more easier. We have a tremendous amount of cases that we can use again and again and again. With license plate recognition, we did here for the Middle East, and then once we are done, they push the envelope again, and we need to detect make, model, and over. And that's pure AI. We need to train hundreds of thousands of data sets to do it. Those are still pretty straightforward. And then there are the complicated cases, smuggling routes and others that we need to go case by case and define those patterns in order to detect properly. It's not an out of the shelf. Nowadays, especially where we come from the US, companies, they do everything .ai. It's a puzzle right now. We detect people.ai, we detect cars.ai. Very nice on a paper, but they have no scars in their bodies. There is no experience. And what we look on these sophisticated projects is to work with partners that has experience. Experience matters. At the end of the day, it's not black magic, as Christen mentioned. It's a lot of hard work behind the scenes. We need to be professionals. This is not a space for amateurs. We have to be professionals. Otherwise, our friends from Honeywell here, they're going to suffer because it's not going to work properly.
Well, it seems to me that there will be penalties for being an amateur in this market, namely that you're going to
As
end
I
up in
did
jail.
mention, they need to build more jails to put this.
You're going to end up in jail. I'm full of questions, but the question is, are you? Is there anyone that wants to make a comment? Oh, the roving microphone, please. And again, just identify yourself before you put the question out. Just over there to the gentleman, Sandy, you're going by. You take that one. There we go.
Thanks for the panelists. My name is Ayman Grada. I'm a security engineer in Crown Prince Court in Abu Dhabi. My question, it will be a collection of what mentioned by Christen and Nabil and James as well. What is behind creating smart cities? As James said, it's happiness. We need to make people happy more than smart cities. So to build a smart city with people happiness, I would like to call what Nabil said, the business case in Egypt. They built a new capital city with the latest maybe technologies. It's smart, very smart cities, very sustainable with everything. So, but as I remember, Cairo population is almost like 15 or 18 million. So how many persons in Cairo will enjoy this new capital? Few thousands who will be able to pay for this luxury to enjoy the smartness or the sustainable zones. While most of the people, they suffering to get air quality, the pure drinking water, the waste management. So do the technology provider and AI developer think to reach to those poverty zones where usually they are the source of threats and crimes in most of the cities here. So AI can, with the analytics, with the behavior-based machines, they can identify and produce or create much more than a sustainable city or like.
Okay. So I think there's a question in there, I think. And I think the question was about the disparity of outcomes in a society where smart technologies are used and not used, the kind of social inequality, I think. Any of the panelists want to talk to that?
Yeah, I'll take it. And I totally agree, because this is something that we feel that when developers are developing those cities, and they require that we want that city to become smart, comes with that the notion that this is a VIP city, right? This is a luxurious city. And accordingly, we're looking for those kind of citizens to be there. That's what the developer has in mind, and that's how he's looking for the return on investment. If I want to invest to make the city, then I'd like to have people here who are able to invest with us, buy those properties. And I believe that this is the wrong way of approaching a smart city. Smart city, one of the pillars of sustainability is inclusivity. It should include everybody. It should include the poor as well as the rich, and it shouldn't be differentiating. And the moment it start differentiating and saying we want that kind of people to live in the city, that's not a smart city, even though it has all the technological aspects in it. And that's my point of view, I believe, and I'd like to voice it. So I agree with what I'm saying. We'd like to see more of those smart cities talking to people, talking to the pain points of people, to the challenges of the city. And that's where we start categorizing it as smart city. Now, technology is an enabler. It shouldn't be overused and utilized to become a burden of investment, rather than an enabler for people to be happier in that city.
Maybe if I can add to what I'm hearing, obviously it all starts with the leadership, and disparities between people within the same communities are a challenge for the leadership. And here, to name the UAE as an example, the leadership has been systematically focusing on happiness. And from customer service centers, they name it now to happiness service centers. And treating people equally with the sustainability and happiness approach is the leadership vision. Now, when we take examples where we should actually be doing more to avoid those gaps, we need to start somewhere. Like Cairo is a 20 million capital in terms of population. The SUD is theoretically handling 8 million. So when the program is completed, you have 8 million people around, I think, 190 acres, 190 million acres. And that's a good starting point. And you can't just, do it in a second. You need to have that leadership vision where we want to bring the happiness level to a certain, to enhance it. And then you start small and you keep deploying. And I think with the technology providers that we're having here in the room, our role is to really look at viable solutions that are economically affordable for the leadership to take such decisions. And early engagement to understand what the focus is actually an enabler for the leadership to take such decisions. It's a heavy investment to deploy smart technologies, and it has to be done in a smart way. Like we need to see what are the challenges. In some cities, pollution is the first priority. Then what do we do to reduce the pollution? And it's an ecosystem that requires all the technologies, the technology providers, but as well as the policymakers to sit around the table and to understand the local challenges, rather than pitch a solution and try to sell it for the sake of selling a new technology.
I think these are all valid points. Sorry, Richard, I'm just going to briefly add to that as well. Happiness might be the sort of the vision, if you like, the kind of the end goal. I would say probably a lot of the cases where we've been doing an evaluation or a project with a client, it's very, very often, if the data is wrong going in to whatever it may be, like an AI model or an initiative, you're going to get the wrong outcomes coming out, So for sure, just to add to the guys' points, I think definitely one of the big things I'd sort of mention and recommend to the room is with these initiatives and with these kind of projects, if you like, where the data is and where it's coming from, and the quality of that data is often really, really key as well. Just to sort of pick up on your points there around general happiness, how do we get there, that kind of thing. So,
Sure. Quick comment.
I also think that, there's it depends on where in the world you are. So for example, I moved from Chicago and we don't think of Chicago as being a smart city, but it has incredibly advanced cameras. I didn't even know this until I moved. Incredibly advanced camera systems and anti-gunshot detection because we have crazy amounts of gangs. So the prioritization there is safety without the public knowing it's happening. I wish I'd known it was happening. It's not happening effectively. But when you come to this part of the world and you have the opportunity to build something from the ground up, I mean, none of us that live in the UAE, who lives in a building that's 10 years old here, let alone 20, 30, 40, 300, like in London or something like that. So the ability to look to see what were the pitfalls that other people made in terms of safety, security, and happiness, and how do we, it's much easier to build it from the ground up than it is to retrofit Chicago or London or Rome for all of the things that people expect as modern conveniences or safety. And the leadership structures in this part of the world who say, I have a vision, and this vision is 20, 50, 100 years. You don't have those visions in Europe and the US because you have election cycles. So you go through trying to get something done, and every 2 years there's a new guy there that makes the decision and there's no funding for it. So when you say I want to do something really cool, like automate traffic and have autonomous ambulances, everyone's like, what are you smoking? And which is legal there. Like, what are you smoking legally here? And how are you going to pay for that? Whereas here, the commitment is, we're going to do it, and this is what's going to look like, and we're not going to make those mistakes. And when the 5 of us come in the room to talk to the client, and we say, this is what we did here, and this is what we did there, the answer instantly is, I don't care. What should I want in the future for my people? Because if you convince me that my people can use it and it will enhance their lives, then we can get it done for you. But do not tell me what they're doing in London and what they're doing someplace else, because they've already messed it up. So
Well,
where are we going?
Yeah, that's one of the upsides of autocracy. Aloisio, do you want to have a final word on this, and in fact on the panel?
Yeah, Richard, I think for me, what Nabil said is equality. Our projects, our experience around the globe is to deliver service from top to bottom. Waste management, you mentioned about waste management before. We have cities that we do the whole waste management. We check areas where a business dump garbage, especially where you put, please do not dump garbage here. That's exactly where they're going to dump the garbage. So we need to make sure that the garbage is collected properly, effectively, the routes are being done properly. And this helps the whole population of the city. I think that is the well-being, is the happiness center. Like here in the Middle East, every city has the happiness center. We need to bring that concept over the ocean for other places. I think that's the well-being of the city, which is the ultimate costing for those initiatives.
Thank you. I mean, we're now going to move, and I hope, honestly, continue the conversation over lunch, where I hope we have a very high happiness quotient. It'll take place just outside this room. And I want you to hold your applause, not just for this excellent group of panelists, and you should stay on because we're going to give you some awards and have a photo. I think we thank Sandy, we'll thank her 15 times again, all the crew who made this possible, clearly all the speakers from all the events, and honestly, all of you for giving up your time and joining us here today. So including yourselves, let's have a big round of applause.